Today we can finally get into some graphics now that you have some of the basics in Java. So what I'm going to need you to do is go to our course page at the intro, and the first thing you need is the JGraphics library. So I've made a real simplified version of a graphics library that we can use, and it's all here. It's not something you'll find elsewhere on the internet, but it's basically a nice way to introduce you to graphics because it can get kind of messy. So just download it from this link, and once you've saved it, you're going to have to put it somewhere that you, let's see, so mine's in downloads, and we're going to have to pull it up in the project now so that Java knows where to find it. So start a new project. And I'll just call mine graphics. And now the important thing is the library that has our graphics in it is not a standard library. So down here where it says libraries, this is where we can add to it. And this is a really useful feature as a programmer because you know, for example, if we're working on a big project together, I can build some code and then you can share it in your library. And you know, quite often you might be working on something and you think, well, I really like some code that'll do, you know, whatever for me, internet stuff or web pages. You can go look for libraries that do that and import them into your project to use them. This is kind of like expanding your toolbox. So the default's always in there. This is the Java development kit. These are the standard libraries that come with Java. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a project. So the one that we want is, it's a jar, which is a Java archive. So we're going to add it. And as I said, mine was in my downloads folder. One tricky thing for you in the lab is sometimes the computer will get cranky if you download it over the network, which means it starts like this and there's a network drive, like something like that. What you want to make sure is that you're dealing with a local computer, which for you I think is H drive. So it'd be like H:\desktop if you download it to your desktop. So what I do is I'll click on JGraphics then. And here's how I know the library actually loaded properly, is you should now see it inside your libraries here. Okay? And just for your own information, if you do want to see, there's stuff here in it. These are the packages in it, and these are my classes and things that I can use. But that's where you can go look for it. Same thing in the Java development kit here, all the different things. So we don't typically browse through a library that way. You usually browse through it with its documentation, which I'll show you in just a second. So now that the library's been loaded, I can ask for it in my program. So what I'm going to do is import, and the library, if you look at the name, is JGraphics. So, and here the package name is Joyce. So J, by the way, is supposed to be for like Joyce graphics, but not important. See, it knows the package there, Joyce, because it can find it in my library, and here's all the different things that I can do with it. So for the most part, when you do a graphics program, you're going to use a lot of these things. So instead of having to single out each one that you want to use, one shortcut you can use in Java is that you can use the star to say import everything in that Joyce package. So this will import all classes. Okay. Now, aside from this, you know, it's really good to be able to import libraries because I can promise you just about whatever you do, it's more efficient to see how to use someone else's library and build on it than to start from scratch, right? Especially with open source projects. So what you're going to want to do is learn to navigate a library, and you do that with what's called Javadoc. So I've listed our documentation here. So the documentation, when you want to find Javadoc, is on that link, and it's always going to look similar to this. For example, let's just say you wanted to look up the Java string class. So I do a Google search for it. And here's Oracle, by the way, owns the Java platform, so that's who you would look for to get the official documentation. So I click on the string class, and here's the Javadoc for the string class. So the format's always the same. It gives you a summary of what you can do with it. Here, first we're going to pick, you know, what would you like to learn about? Well, I'd like to use a graph, or I'd like to use a circle, or a line. Whatever it is you're using, you can click on it. It'll take you there. And now it'll tell you about it. These are constructors. That means how you build the object. So far, the constructor you've seen is, if we were to do a scanner, you've seen something like this where you go scanner input equals new scanner system.in, and this isn't going to work because I haven't imported it, but this is just to remind you that's how it worked when you built a scanner. The way you can tell that you're using a constructor is you're calling on the new operator, which means it has to build a new scanner. So when you say new in Java, this is where it goes in your code to the constructor. So here's how I can build new graphs this way. Okay? Things I can do with a graph, these are all the different things I can do with a graph methods. So you might ask yourself, like, how do I erase a graph? Oh, well, there's a method for erasing, and it says here as a summary, it clears the graph of all objects. So basically what this would do is wipe all the figures that you put onto it out of it. Drawing things, getting the colors and key codes, all kinds of stuff you learn about later. But basically, this is kind of like a toolbox, and this tells you how each of the tools in the toolbox works. So, if you're looking for something that you might be doing your program and say, oh, I'd really like to know how to change the background color of my graph. I don't want it to be white. I'd really like it to be pink. So then you can go look through your Javadoc, and there it says, oh, get background color. That'll tell you what the background color is. And then if you want to change the background color, there's a method here, set background color. There's actually a couple. So that's a bit about how documentation works, and I'm going to rely on you to use documentation a lot. The shortcuts are here, so generally if you're looking for something about it, this is the fastest way to find it. It's the way generally all programmers, including myself, do it, so don't be surprised if I ask if you've checked the documentation first. It's a good habit to be in before you start relying on people to just give you the answer. Now, okay, so enough about documentation. Let's actually start doing some graphics. So everything in graphics begins with a graph. So I'll call it window. You can call it any name you want. It's just the variable, remember. So when I do this, what'll happen, this is actually a graphics program. I can run it, and a window is going to pop up. So it's no longer down here in the output. You're going to end up getting well, a window. Not too interesting because we haven't done anything to the window. So what can we do with the window? Well, if we don't put anything in, how are we going to get any change? So let's see. Here's the one that I just did. Nothing in it, creates a default graph with no title, 400 pixels by 400 pixels, and a white background. So let's just say I wanted to make a bigger window or a smaller window. I can change it by giving it width and height in pixels here. So what would that look like? I would say maybe I want it to be 400 pixels by 800 pixels. Now when I run it, it builds that window that's 400 pixels wide and 800 pixels tall. You might say, well, I don't really care about sizing it, but I'd like to give it a title. So here's how you give it a title. You give it a string inside the graph brackets so that when you build it, it's going to call this, give it a title, and in this case it's going to be Hello World. And there's my title up there. Okay. So, what if you want to combine them? Well, give me a title, a width, and a height, and then I can build you your window. And finally, one other way you could build it is you could give it a background color. So I'll finish off with this one here just so you can see how that constructor works. It's a string, that's the title, the width and the height are integers, and then it's a color. So this is a new class for us, the color class. It's pretty handy because it helps you, you don't need to know the computer code for colors, it manages it for you. So let's bring this into our program so we can use it. It's another great one to import when it's time to do your project. So import java.awt.color. So the color class is the last argument. Let's just say here I'm going to make a window that's 500 by 500, and here's how you get colors. You ask the color class for one of its constants. See how they're all capitalized? Remember, that's a constant, and you can see here it's a final color. So pick the color that you want the background to be. Maybe I'll pick orange. Now when I run it, it's going to have a title, Hello World, 500 by 500, and its color is orange. So if you didn't know how to build the color orange, there it is for you. Now, of course, this window is not very interesting unless we start putting some graphics onto it. So I'm going to introduce you to some of the basic shapes that you can use in JGraphics, and as we go on, I'll give you some more advanced features too. So let's pick some simple shapes. For example, let's just say we want to draw a line on this graph. all of the things start with a J prefix for the Joyce graphics. So this would be like a J line. I'll call it line. And I want to build a line. So what I should do is go and take a look here, J line. How can I build a J line? Well, I can give it the X and Y coordinates of the start and the X and Y coordinates of the end of the point, and it'll draw a line segment between them. So what you should know about the graph is the graph, if I was to show you the y-axis and the x-axis, it goes from -10 to 10 and -10 to 10 for both the x and y-axes. It's possible to change that if you don't like the way that they've been set. Down here you can change what the minimums and maximums of the window are. So normally it goes from -10 to 10. Let me just show you then what it would look like if we draw a line in it. I'm going to say go from the point x equals -5 and y equals +5 to the point x equals 9, y equals 9. Now nothing's going to happen when I do this because I've built two objects. They don't know about each other right now. They just live in the computer's memory. So to get them to work together, I have to ask the window to draw the line that I've just created. So whenever you're working with objects, hopefully you're getting the hang of this, but the dot operator is how you call on its service. So I'm asking the window to draw the line. Now when I run it, there's the line. And let me just remind you the way the coordinates work. This is -5 for x and 5 up for y. So that's why it shows up here, and then in the top corner 9, 9. This would be 10, 10. That's the edge. And remember, it goes from -10 to 10 and -10 to 10 here, unless you decide to change it. So you might say, you know what, I'd like to see what else we can do with a line. A lot of the things we can do with a line are very similar to what we can do with other shapes. So for example, I might say I don't really like the color that I'm dealing with, so I would like to change it. So we can set the color here, set the fill color, and actually let's start by setting the thickness. Whoops, sorry. So when you hit the dot, that's one nice thing in NetBeans. Most compilers will do this for you nowadays. It gives me all my list of choices as well. And so if you're looking at these methods and you want to know more about them, you can find them in the Javadoc. But I said let's take a look at set thickness. So set thickness, let's say I give it a 5. What's it going to do is it's going to now draw a 5-pixel thick line. So that line is much thicker. I can also do stuff like line dot set some different colors and other things. So let's just say, for example, that I wanted to set its fill color, and well, I think it's picked yellow. Let's say purple. Do I get purple in my? No, I think it's magenta is the, yeah. So if I pick magenta as my color, there's my magenta line. Okay. Now we can also move the line, so I can go like line dot move, and this is the change in x and change in y. So we could play around, like let's say we want to move it back by 2, and let's say I want to move it down by 5. So it's going to basically, if you see where my mouse is now, it's going to go back 2 and down 5 when it draws. So now you see the line has been shifted back and down when it was drawn this time. Okay. So one other thing I'll mention to you is you notice that we've set up the line and all its properties and then we drew it. If you were to change its properties down here, nothing would happen on the screen. And like if I was to set its color to be like, you know, well, yellow I guess is what it's suggesting, but if I was to set its color here, you won't see it because you've already drawn it on the screen. So you know, the way your program flows in this linear fashion, you still have to watch for that when you do it. If you've drawn it, then your properties should be set before you draw it, unless you intend to hide it from the user. Okay, so that's a basic kind of introduction to a line. Let's take a look at some other things that we could put in it. the next most common thing that we're going to use is a point. So let's say I have a J point. I'm going to build a J point, and as you might expect, it's just going to be 0, 0 are the coordinates. Sorry, not 0, 0. X and Y are the coordinates. So let's just say that the point I'm going to have is 0, 0, which is the center of my screen. Then what I'm going to do with it is I can either draw it if I like, but it's going to be pretty hard to see because it's only a single pixel when you draw a point. I'm not sure it'll even show up for it. Well, it's there. It's a little black dot right there. So it can be useful to draw single pixels if you like, but more so what we're going to do is build other shapes with it. So another shape that you can use is, we can call this J circle. C is a new J circle, and what I need to build a circle is a center and a radius. So that's what I'm going to call this. Instead of P, I'll give it a better name. I'll call it center. So I can go center, and let's make this radius 3. So now when I draw this for you, I'm going to draw a circle whose center is 0, 0 and whose radius is 3. So there's 0, 0 and radius 3. Okay. Now because I drew the line, this is actually a three-dimensional picture we're looking at. Because I drew the line first, when I draw the circle next, it comes on top of the line. So you could switch the order if you wanted, but it goes in 3 dimensions where the most recent thing you've drawn is on top. The circle has a lot of similar features, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time showing you them. And again, you can play with the documentation to see exactly how you want to do it, but shapes have a little bit different. There's 2 methods for setting. You can set the fill color or set the border color. So let's just say I set the border color to be color dot, why don't we do pink. And I'm also going to set the fill color. And this time I'm going to do color, whoops, let's do color dot, let's do gray, I guess. How about green? So now when I draw it, the border color is the outside of the shape and the fill color is the inside. So it's really hard to see the gray, or the pink rather, so I'm going to make that pink a different color. Let's make it black, just so you can see the way it draws. So now there's a black edge around it. Okay, and again you might say, well, how do I make that thicker, because I don't want just a thin black line like that, it's too hard to see. Well, when it draws that circle, you can change its thickness. So now when we take a look, it's going to be much thicker and easier to see, so you can vary its thickness as you want in your picture. Okay, and the other way you can do colors when you do your shapes, same way you have here, you'll notice that you get 2 choices once you get to set color. Oops, just trying to get it to prompt us. One of them here takes 3 integers, which says red, green, and blue. Now this is one of the ways that computers store colors. You might have heard this as RGB color. Basically, you can think of each color as a dimension, and each one gets 8 bits of information. So there's 24 bits in this color, and when you combine them up, you basically get all the colors of the rainbow. So for example, if you want all red, 8 bits means the largest value you'll get is 255. And I don't want any green, and I don't want any blue. So this, although it looks strange, is going to set the border color to be red. Right? So this is more versatile because the color class is limited. You could do any color you want. For example, it's red, green, blue. So if you want to do a blue border, 255 is full blue. Maybe you don't want that much blue in the picture. Maybe you want half blue. So 128 means less blue. You can see it's actually going closer to black. So maybe I'll just do like 32. Should be even darker now. It's almost black. It's got a bit of a tinge of blue. But you can keep mixing them. For example, you may not know this. You may actually, but now it's red, green, blue. So I'm mixing red with blue. So this is kind of like when you finger painted in elementary school. You get purple. Don't know if you know what red and green makes. Maybe you can make a prediction. It's yellow. So this is one place where comments are very important because it's not obvious when you look at it that that color's yellow. So make a note to yourself there. That way when you run your program and you're thinking, oh, which shape is it that's drawing this way? The colors can help you identify it, and if you know that that means yellow, then it's easy for you to go between them. But if that comment's not there, then you don't see it obvious just by looking at it. So there's a tool here we can use if we go to accessories and we pick up good old paint. Then in the paint program, the reason I'm showing you this is you can define custom colors. So you're going to go to the custom colors here when you have this, and you know this is the color that's showing right now, and you'll notice it says red, green, blue. 0, 0, 0 is black. So you might say, well, I want some kind of magenta. Maybe I want this magenta here. And you know, however I decide to pick, I say, well, what color am I looking for? Let's say, you know, like an ocean blue or something like that. If this is the one I want, 83.166.206 is the code. So I'm going to go and put that back in NetBeans. 83.166, and I think it was 206. Yep. So now I have no idea what that would be unless I make a comment. That circle should have an ocean blue ring around it. Okay, so that's how you can define just about any color you want that's available by using paint just as a real simple tool to find these RGB colors. So you'll have to play with both the vertical here, up and down, as well as the this mouse in the main area. There's also color pickers on the internet. If you just Google RGB color picker, you can do the same thing as I'm doing here. It's a pretty common tool in computer science. Okay, so I do want to just quickly run through a couple of the other shapes then. You can play with their properties on your own time. But a J rectangle is one of them. And the way a rectangle works is you need a point to represent the top left, and a width and a height. So for example, let's just say I'm going to make a new point, and the place I'd like to draw it, maybe I want to draw this at -5, 5. So that's the top left corner of where my rectangle is going to be drawn on the screen. And let's say I want it to be 5 for the width and, I don't know, 7.5 for the height. And of course I didn't draw it, my apologies. Okay, and I'm going to move my circle here because I do want the rectangle to be on top, so I will draw that circle up here and then draw the rectangle on top of it since you've already seen the circle. So there's my rectangle, and you can see its width is 5. There's the top left corner there, which the center is 0, 0, so I went -5 and +5. That's my top left. The width is 5, and the height is 7.5. Okay, so that's how you draw it. You need the top left corner as an anchor spot. So one thing that's really handy to do when you're trying to pick, point your shapes in certain places, graph paper is really handy because then you can actually draw it by hand first and then measure out the coordinates and the sizes. I know you really want to be on the computer, but trust me, it will save you a lot of time if you make a paper copy first and then transfer it over to Java. So here's just a couple quick things that we can do, show you some more tools. One thing that you can do with these as well is I can also rotate the shape. So any shape can be rotated, and the way you do it is you set its rotation. And it works just like you know from math. So if I wanted to rotate it 45, that's going to rotate it 45 degrees counterclockwise. So now when I show you it, it's on a tilt like that. Okay. The other thing I can do, which is kind of neat, is I can show you a quick way to animate. I can go window.draw the rectangle, And then I can tell the window to wait. And you have to give it milliseconds. That's generally what we work on in games and things like that. So if I say wait 1,000 milliseconds, I'm telling it to wait 1 second. So when I run this program now, you're going to see the rectangle. It'll wait a second. Now there it is turned. So why do you think I ended up with 2? Well, you'll notice here I've got 2 draws happening. So I drew the rectangle 2 times. It got a fresh set of pixels for that rectangle. One solution you could do is you could go like this and go window.erase. I don't want to erase the whole thing. I just want to erase that rectangle. So what it'll do is it'll erase it, rotate it, and then do it. So that's good, but you'll notice that when we run it, there's a lot of pixels that don't need to be changed. Sort of like this middle here that rotated didn't need to be changed. So if you do this in your programs and you have a lot of animation, you're going to get flicker. So the way you avoid flicker is you don't draw and erase, you animate the shape, and basically that's a more efficient way of doing draw and erase. It will only change the pixels that need to be changed, so it's much nicer looking. So there it is. It's the exact same effect, but when you animate it, that takes the shape, and as I said, it animates the pixels for you, so you don't have to draw and erase together. Alright, so this one's a little longer. Hopefully you're a little more interested since you get to start playing with some graphics, but the last thing we're going to look at then is playing around with a couple of the shapes you haven't seen, which is an oval and a polygon. So an oval is defined by 3 things. First of all, we need a center. So I'll call it oval center. And I don't know, it doesn't, at this point we're just doing some random stuff to show you the way it draws, so I'm not going to spend too much time thinking about where it is. So what I need is the center, and then I need the width and height of the oval. So let's just say I went 6 and, I don't know, 4. So it has a width of 6 and a height of 4 when I, well, of course when I draw it, I do need to actually go in here and draw it. So there's my oval right there. See, the width is 6 and the height is 5, and the center is -3, 3. The last thing I believe that I need to show you is the J polygon, and the J polygon is kind of funny. So let's try this here. J polygon P equals new J polygon. So that's the way it works when you start. You literally just build a polygon and it's empty, because what it's doing is waiting for you to give it points. So I'm going to say p.add a point. There's 2 ways you can do it. One is you can actually build a J point, like these guys we've already built here, and then you can pass the J point to it. Or you can just give it the coordinates. So that's the one we're going to do here, is we're just going to give it coordinates. So let's go -5 and 5. And I'm going to start spelling out the coordinates here to make just a square, because I do want to show you something. So I need 4 points. So this would be top left, top right, then this would be bottom right, and bottom left. So what's going to happen is the polygon always connects the points in the order that you give it. So it's going to go this point, drawn to this point, drawn to this point, drawn to this point, and then it connects itself back to the beginning. So if I go window.draw, it's not very exciting. It's going to be a big square from -5 to 5 to here. Then it connected to here, last point, and then it'll always go back to the beginning. So the reason I'm telling you this is because if I shift the order around and I put the points in carelessly, this is top left. Now what I've done is move to bottom right. So I've gone from top left to bottom right. And if you look at the picture now, it's actually a bow tie, because it went like this, from here down to here, then the next point I gave it was up there, then there, and back to the beginning. Sometimes we want that kind of behavior because we can make much, more interesting and different shapes if the polygon's more versatile like that. So that's really the only thing you need to know with a polygon, is that you got to be careful that your points are in the order that you mean when you put them in, because the order does affect the way it's going to be drawn. Okay, so that's a ton of stuff for you there to think about, but hopefully it's enough to get you playing with your own graphics programs and your first assignment.